Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good day, listener, and welcome to this week's special episode of Global Arena, recorded via Zoom on Monday, the 9th of August, 2021. I'm your host, Umar Isa Dandago. Well, a lot of people believe that Middle East is just complex and complicated. And this is because of a number of factors and forces, both at home and abroad. And as many analysts believe, Middle East politics is not just intricately complex because of religious differences, but because of power, dominance, and influence. And indeed, the two major powers are Iran, which is Shia, and Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni. But is this rivalry really religiously based? Well, some people would think so, but many analysts believe that it has got nothing to do with Islam. It's just purely a power struggle and a struggle for dominance and influence in the region. Because you got the Iranians backing Bashar al-Assad in Syria, backing the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and some groups in Iraq, some militia groups in Iraq, not forgetting its quote-unquote deeply rooted influence in the Iraqi government and internal affairs, which the Intercept newspaper and the New York Times revealed about a year or two back. Well, the Saudis too are accused of quote-unquote aiding and abetting terrorists, plus its bombing campaign in Yemen, which is being heavily supported by the United States of America and the UAE, plus the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, which made a lot of headlines in 2019. And as the CIA and other international organizations believe and reported that it was Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, who ordered, quote, to either capture or kill Jamal Khashoggi. This and a lot of intricately confusing things are happening in the Middle East. That is why we are here to discuss and unpack some of those mysteries. Plus, again, the Western influence, the so-called meddling in the Middle Eastern affairs by the Western and Eastern power blocs, mainly the United States by the West, and Russia and China by the East. So to discuss this, I am joined by two Middle East affairs experts and analysts. Muhammad Qaddam Sidiq Isa, Middle East affairs analyst based in Dubai, and a columnist for Daily Trust, and a commentator for local and international media organizations such as the BBC, Hausa Service. Murtaza Hussain is a reporter, national security correspondent for the Intercept newspaper based in the United States of America, and he joins us from Brooklyn, New York City. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on Global Arena.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you both on the show, and I'm sure we're going to have an interesting conversation with both of you, because Global Arena is quite lucky to have you on the same table, because we are going to discuss Middle East from different perspectives. Without further ado, let me put this question to Murtaza first of all. How complex is the Middle East politics?
It's very complicated, and there are many different countries with different approaches and different demographic backgrounds and ideologies. So certainly there's a lot of things to learn and a lot of things to keep track of. And then, of course, there's many other foreign powers, as you said, are involved in the region as well. And then, it's not necessarily more complicated than other regions, but unfortunately there's so much instability, so it becomes more of an issue for debate.
Yes, Qaddam, how complex and complicated is the Middle Eastern politics, and why is it so complex?
Well, indeed it is, although it is not supposed to, because it's a region that is supposed to be stable. If you look at the dominance of kind of a one ethnic group, that is, Arabs, and the dominance of the Islamic religion, and the intercultural links between the people across the region, is supposed to be stable politically and socially, but it is not. This is where the question rises. Why is it so? Well, I think as I have always said, that it is interesting to just look at one or two facts that underline the instability and the inherent instability of the region. That if you look at the genesis of each major conflict in the region, you will see it goes back to one of the three only non-Arab countries in the region. There are only three non-Arab countries in the region, which are Israel, Iran, and Turkey. And it's very interesting that every major conflict in the region is traced to one of these three countries. Starting, for example, with Israel, as we know, that the creation of Israel in 1948 by the Western government, and of course, endorsement by the United Nations and other powers. That was the beginning of the so-called Arab-Israeli conflict, which has raged for more than, you can say now, almost 80 years or 70-something years. The creation of that country, sorry?
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry to cut you off. I would like us to talk about Israel separately much later in the program. But one interesting thing that you just said is that three non-Arab countries are in one way or the other responsible or the reasons for the instability in the region. And one key country you said is Iran. Murtaza, is Iran a threat to the Middle East, as some Western people and Saudi Arabia also believe?
Well, of course, Iran is part of the Middle East, and they have their own interests and their own perspective on the region. Ultimately, the only way that they're not going to leave the Middle East, and they have to be part of it in some sense. The only way that there could ever be peace in the region, as much as to the extent that the situation there is a proxy war, as you said earlier, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, is if they find a way to accommodate Iran within the Middle East, and then Iran also accommodate itself to its neighbors in a way that they find acceptable. There's a threat, it's difficult to say. Some would say yes and some would say no, but it depends on perspective. And of course, Iranians have been very aggressive with regards to their Arab neighbors, but also they feel that they're under threat by the United States or whoever else, Israel. And everyone is acting in a way that they view to be in their security interests or their economic interests or political interests. Ultimately, until there's a security arrangement which satisfies the needs of all parties, it's likely that there will still be conflict between Iran and its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Qaddam. Earlier, before coming on this show, I was watching Mehdi Hassan's interview with the late Jamal Khashoggi and Said Hussain Mousavian, is an Iranian academic based in the United States. It was an old interview since Jamal Khashoggi was part and parcel of the Saudi royal family. One interesting thing that Jamal kept on repeating, especially in the beginning of the interview, was that the reason why they are not afraid of Iran, the reason why that they are so concerned about Iran and its own quote-unquote aggression in the Middle Eastern region is because of its own what they call idea of expansionism. Do you see it this way, Muhammad Qaddam, that Iran is trying to expand its own empire, ruling everybody, making everybody under its own control?
Well, of course, see, before I just address this question, let me just make another important point here.
Good.
Before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, this is I'm saying that to debunk the claim that there is a kind of a power struggle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There is no, at all. There is only one country. There is only one country which is hell-bent on dominating the entire region at the expense of others. And the others, being Saudi Arabia, maybe the biggest of them, is resisting. It's not issue of a power struggle. Because why? Saudi Arabia had been in existence for 47 years before the creation of Iranian Revolution. 47 years. within those 47 years, because Saudi Arabia was created in 1932, within those 47 years, it had never tried to dominate or expand into any country in the Middle East. And there had never been any issue of Shia, Sunni. This had died more than maybe 100 or 200 years ago. But since 1979, the situation started to change. Why? Because it is part and parcel of the Iranian Revolution to expand into other countries. They have this written in their constitution. They have this as one of their basic fundamental agendas. That is, they call it the Wilayatul Faqih. You need to understand the ideological background of the regime to understand why it is hell-bent on dominating other Muslim countries, not only Arab countries. Actually, it is targeting Arab countries because they are the closest. But the ultimate goal is not only Arab countries, but the entire Muslim world, because it originates from the belief that there is a kind of someone who was God sent named Mahdi, and he is supposed to be the leader of the whole world, but he disappeared more than 1,200 years ago. And now this regime is representing that Mahdi. And that Mahdi is supposed to be the leader of not only Muslims, but the entire world. But of course, he will start with the Muslims. So the leader of Iranian Revolution, who at that time was Khomeini, he assumed that role of the Mahdi. That's why they call him the deputy Mahdi. That is his deputy in this world. Now, and they have that Wilayatul Faqih, because there is no Mahdi now, so there is a deputy for him. And this deputy got the right and is entitled to dominate the entire Muslim countries, at least in the world, of course, starting with Arabs. They started pursuing that agenda immediately. And definitely why Saudi Arabia all along had been in the picture, because it was the first and would always be the most important target. Why? Because of that two important in which coincidentally whatever fell within the country, because this is a very big source of influence for every country that has those sites within its geographical territory. So you have to look at this from this perspective. That's why when Iran started that, of course, it has always pursued that agenda on the basis of what it called Shiism and all these kind of things. Even before the revolution in Iran, there had always been Shia all over the region, but there had never been any kind of strife or conflict or Shi'i, Sunni, whatever. But for Iran to penetrate into these countries, it needed to manipulate these religious ideology of those Shiites across this country. And of course—
Muhammad Qaddam, many people believe that it's not only Iran that is responsible for the instability in the region. Saudi Arabia has its own fair share, of course, because look at the bombing of Yemen, look at what's happening in Syria, look at a lot of other things in Bahrain, among other countries. This is the argument that some people, especially those who are pro-Iran, are putting forward. Don't you think that the blame should be squarely shared by both sides?
If you understand the dynamics, you will know that, as I say, there is kind of an aggressor and someone who is resistant. All the instances—
So who is the aggressor?
Of course, yes, definitely. This is the country that is officially hell-bent on dominating other countries, dominating all other, especially Muslim countries. Now, if all the instances you brought, they are all part of this, of the same kind of a game. If you are looking, for example, at Houthi in Yemen, this is a group which is loyal to Iran, and that group is in Yemen. And Saudi Arabia is seeing that group as a threat. And of course, the group has always said, of course, its target is to Saudi Arabia, and it has attacked Saudi Arabia hundreds of times, and is taking its orders from Tehran. So Saudi Arabia
now in the process of eliminating and wiping out Houthi rebels, Saudi Arabia is engaged in killing innocent civilians, mostly children, and starving them to death.
Definitely, there have been all those kind of things, and definitely there have been many excesses. And war this is part of war. This is something that cannot be avoided. But
so who is to blame? Saudi or Iran?
Well,
who is to blame?
Well, if you look at it, the general picture, the whole international community should be blamed. Why the international community is not doing the right thing to put the end to the what the Houthi group did in Yemen. That is by putting pressure, the appropriate pressure on Iran, because it's the only country that can stop the Houthis from doing what they are doing. So it is the failure of the international community. On the other hand, you have a country which is Saudi Arabia, which is seeing that it is actually the target of these groups and Iran in general. So it is what is doing, it is arguing that it is doing all what is doing primarily to protect itself from the Houthis and of course from Iran. On the other hand, the Houthis, as they always done, they are using the population as human shield. So definitely in this kind of war, you cannot rule out collateral damages or killing of innocent people, which is of course not justifiable. But I have said that
the Saudis should apologize.
Actually, they should stop that, definitely.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying in that, on what basis?
Yes.
On what basis? Stopping that, it means that these killings and this instability would consume them. That is
okay.
So. This is
Murtaza. Okay. I'm sorry to cut you off. Murtaza, what have you got to say about this things that we're talking about? Iran, expansionism, Yemen, and other stuff like that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in what Muhammad said, and it's correct that after the Iranian Revolution, Iran became very aggressive, and one of the goals of the Iranian Revolution was to export the revolution to other countries, which is very similar to other countries in history that had revolutions, like France and so forth. Revolutionary countries always want to export the revolution, and they became more aggressive. But then also, we have to look at the history of what happened after that too. After the revolution, the first thing that happened was there was a invasion of Iran by Saddam Hussein at that time, which was supported by the Western countries, was supported by the other Arab countries, Saudi Arabia among them as well. Kuwait, yes. And then what happened was this resulted in the radicalization of the revolution. And a lot of the people who were the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards were very involved in Iraq and Syria and these places. There were people who were veterans of that war, the Iran-Iraq war, which had a very big impact on the nature of the post-revolutionary Iranian government. So the way they view it is that they view it that they had a revolution and then they did all want to export it. It's true, but then they also were attacked by the Arabs. And then they view this conflict in Iraq and other places as a continuation of that war that started then. And it's true that also it's not very clear if that they would stop trying to export it. But there's a very long history of conflict on all sides. It's very, very, very dangerous. And the issue with Saudi Arabia is that they are status quo power to a large degree. But also, when the Iranians, after the revolution, started to export the revolution, including to Shia communities, trying to make Shia, they're patrons of the Shia different countries, but also trying to use the Palestinian issue to gain more Islamic legitimacy. Saudi Arabia also did something very similar, which is that they started to try to radicalize and politicize Sunni communities in many countries, including in Pakistan. And they also responded in a way which caused more problems and resulted in more increase in terrorism and so forth. It's very hard to say who is more responsible at this point. It's many years have passed. But, there's definitely a lot of to criticize on all sides. And if Iran stopped, if it pulled back all their forces to Iran and stopped supporting Hezbollah and Houthis and all these different groups that support different countries in Iraq and Syria, maybe the conflict would end, maybe. But then also maybe it would continue. Maybe it would continue and then the Iranian government would be overthrown. It's very hard to say. I don't know. But
Okay.
all sides, it's very complicated. But there's a long history and it's very difficult to unravel it. But until there's some agreement, it will not end.
Okay, you said that if Iran stops what it's doing, then the conflict may end, while it may not end. Why is it that it may not end to some people? Is because of the Western influence and interest in the region. You are based in the United States of America. You're working there. I'm sure you're living with your family members, enjoying all the luxury of the United States of America. But on the one hand, many people believe that the Western countries, including the United States, especially the United States and Russia, are trying to use those regional powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia, to their own advantage. And that's why all those stuff are happening. It seems like Saudi Arabia is fighting Iran in those places, Syria, Yemen, and other places like that. While it's not under the carpet, it's the US fighting Russia. How do you see this?
Well, it's interesting. It's for the United States, they have a very long relationship with Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf Arab countries going back to early 20th century. And those countries are very important to them because they supply most of the world's oil, and then also they buy a lot of US weapons, many weapons which are used in Yemen today. And for the stability of these countries is very important to them. And it's not just with Iran they have problem. They have problem with Turkey. They have problem, and they're having good relations with Israel now, so the problem is ending with them. But they're very concerned about the stability and making sure that the monarchies continue to survive and exist for next century as well. Excuse me. But from the American perspective, these countries, they have very good ties with the Saudis and with the other Gulf Arab countries and their allies, and they have good elite ties with them. And their stability is very interesting to them. Meanwhile, with Iran, as Mohammed said, it's a revolutionary or revisionist country, as you can say. It's more ideological in some sense, and they do not have good relations with America. They have very bad history with America, going back to the revolution when they took the hostages at the embassy. This nuclear deal between Iran and America, I think it's very hard for it to happen now, because after what happened with Trump and those years, it really impacted the deal and made it less sustainable. But it shows that there is a desire on the part of Americans to get out of the region and to stop being so closely involved. And then, I think unfortunately, if they leave the region and there's no peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, there's no ceasefire between the conflict between them, then what's going to happen is that there's going to be more fighting and more war, and then there could be attack against Saudi Arabia by Iran. Who knows? It's very possible. And then, it's difficult, but I think the Americans that you see in Afghanistan and Iraq, they want to leave. And it's been many years, and they did not have a happy time in the Middle East, and no successes were had. They would like to get out, and maybe that would mean selling more arms to the Arab countries so they can defend themselves, and also more closely ties between Israel and the Arab countries so they can work together and fight Iran, which they both view as a threat to both of them.
Okay, Qaddam, I'll ask you later, a little bit later about the Iran nuclear deal, because Murtaza has just spoken about it. But in a minute, Murtaza, do you see a double standard from the side of the United States that it helped Saddam Hussein fight Iran from 1980 to 1989, and now it captured him? He said that he had WMD, weapons of mass destruction. And then there was a time in the history that it colluded, can I say colluded, or it worked with Iran to achieve some certain objectives. It even worked with Qasem Soleimani in fighting ISIS. That was, I think, in 2014 or 16. And later they killed him. Do you see a double standard that if the United States is interested in you as a country, it can use you. While if it is not interested, then it can leave you and even say that you are a terrorist or something.
Yes, we see this in many different countries. And then, of course, yeah, as the Intercept reported in those documents, the US worked very closely, not directly, but indirectly with Iran to fight ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Also, they worked very closely with Iran directly to fight the Taliban in 2001 when they invaded Afghanistan, because Iran was also hostile to Taliban. Iran and US have many same interests in the Middle East, actually. It's ironic that they're enemies, but they have many same interests. Their differences are their relations with the Arab countries and with Israel, which Iran is opposed to. It's not so. Unfortunately, the one also issue is that in Washington D.C., of course, there's many powerful lobbies, the Israel lobby and also the Saudi Arab lobby. They have a lot of money and they have close ties to U.S. government. So the issue is that their interests are very strongly represented, but other countries, whatever country they are, Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Europe, they don't have a lot of money. They don't have influence and lobbies in D.C. It's very hard for them to have their interests represented in DC, whatever they are. But everyone in DC, they think a lot about what the Israelis want. They think a lot about what the Arabs want, and then they see their perspective a lot, and they're actually friends with them on a personal level. Whereas other countries, whether their position is legitimate or not, or their interests are actually closer to the Americans or not, their interests are not represented. Now, at the same time, this is going on. But also it's also in Iran, ideologically is opposed to West, ideologically is opposed to America. They say they have a very anti-American ideology that goes back to the revolution and goes back to the nature of the government, nature of the regime. So that also, from their perspective, has been an issue. And maybe this nuclear deal was a step to maybe ending this conflict, but it's hard to say. It's very difficult to say. And I think that what Mohammed said is actually true. I think that there's a desire on the part there's an imperialist tendency on the part of the Iranian revolutionary government that they would like to dominate the Middle East. And it's not necessarily they want to invade Saudi Arabia, but they would like to be the dominant power in the Middle East, just the way that Turkey also would like to be the dominant power. But because this also, you have to think about it in the history, the longer history. There was a very big Persian Empire in the Middle East. Sasanian Empire, and also after Islam, the Safavid Empire and the Qajar Empire, and then there were also the Ottomans, and they controlled a lot of the Middle East. The Arab countries were not independent, so those countries, they think that their borders are too small today. They would like to make their borders bigger and the size that they believe that they are, which includes many of the Arab countries themselves, which are created after colonialism, and that's history sort of informs their behavior today to some degree. They have very proud history, and they would like to. I think they view some of the Arab countries like Saudi Arabia or UAE and other countries like that. They don't give them full respect for that reason, because they think that they are small or new or young and so forth. And I think this history also plays a role in the situation.
Okay, Qaddam, have you got something to add upon what Murtaza has said?
On this point, Mr. Murtaza addressed it well. Actually, it is exactly. It's not issue of say you call it maybe a double standard. It is actually a multiple standard. This is the politics. Yeah, this is the politics of pragmatism. No country is 100%. Actually, no country is even close to principle, as they always claim. They are always playing it 100% opposite to what they are claiming. So it is the interest that determine, the interest of each country that determines its policies, that determines is what it's going to do. If it is, that is regardless of whether that thing is right or wrong. That's why, as Mr. Murtaza has rightly mentioned, the instances where the United States has been working closely with Iran, which is supposed to be an enemy country. In fact, it is not in the interest of the West and the United States included for the Iranian regime to collapse. It's not in their interest. This is regardless of all the media, all the propaganda from both countries, down with America, which is in Iran or in Washington, saying that Iran is a threat to US interests. All these are not true. Actually, they are not interested in the regime collapse in Tehran, because it is playing an important role that guarantees the continuation of the need of the Arab countries to feel that they need the support of the United States to be protected, and the support of the Western world. Because if in case now, in the absence of Iran, then there will be no excuse for Saudi Arabia, for example, to remain the largest weapon buyer from the United States. It is the largest weapon customer of the US weaponry. So in the absence of Iran, this market definitely will collapse, because Saudi Arabia will not feel threatened. That is so. Iran is
so the US and its allies, the US and other Western powers are profiting from, can we say, war, conflicts, and violence.
Definitely. That's why you see now the situation. Now the US and the Western allies, they no longer need the oil of the Middle East, because now the oil of these countries is not going to the United States or the West. It is mostly going to the East, to India, South Korea, Japan, China, all those Eastern countries. Now, the oil from this part of the world, the United States is taking less than 2% of its need of oil from this part of the world. This is explaining its change of policies towards the Middle East. This explains it is withdrawal, it is gradual withdrawal from these countries, because it is arguing that it cannot remain there to protect these countries while it was already there basically to protect this country because of oil. Now that they don't need the oil in this part of the world, they are arguing that the countries who are benefiting from the oil in this part of the world, which are Eastern countries, should take over that protection, if you can call it that. This is what is encouraging Iran, is emboldening Iran to carry on what it's doing in the absence of the US influence, or rather presence, in the region.
Qaddam, should Iran be allowed to have nuclear weapons?
Ordinarily, yes, of course, yes. It is a country, and every country should have it, especially if you are looking at it from the pragmatic perspective. See, in this world now, even though the world is claiming to be civilized, we'll call it, but in reality, let me tell you, it is the military power of a country that determines its influence,
so
not economic power, not technological power, not anything. That's why Iran, in its ambition to be influential in the Middle East and then in the world, it knows, it realizes this, so that it is pursuing to have a nuclear weapon, so that it will be also influential, because this is it. If you want to be hard, you need to be strong. The might is right. This is what is actually going in global politics. But now, when it comes to Iran, countries who feel that they are threatened already by Iran, they feel that they will be at the receiving end should Iran be allowed to have the nuclear capabilities, because at the end of the day, they are going to be the target of Iran bullying using that nuclear power. Because of course this is obvious. Iran is not going to threaten Israel. This is forget of propaganda. It's not going to threaten any Western country.
Despite the animosity and the
no, forget of that. There is no such thing as animosity or whatever.
Let's wrap it up. Okay, Murtaza, finally, what can you say about Iran nuclear deal?
Okay, it's less than a minute left, but I say that the nuclear deal, it's the sign that the US would like to leave the region, and of course, it would like to have a situation that leave whereby the countries sort out issues themselves. Other countries are very worried about the deal, and I kind of understand why, because they still have bad relations with Iran. I don't think that Iran will develop a nuclear weapon in the near term, but they may develop the breakout capacity to develop one short term if they needed to. So I see that probably the deal will not result in stability in the region, although it will give the chance for the Americans to leave.
Okay, this is the end of this. I think we can call it the first episode of this. It's going to be like a series or something. I'm looking forward to hosting both of you again very soon in order to continue this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.